At the time of its release, Super Smash Bros. On Nintendo 64 was the definitive example of a crossover spectacle, a one-of-a-kind sensation, even when lined up against its younger sequels. The original game is concise, allowing each individual game and stage to thrive just as much as the next in the roster. Every series is represented with just about the same amount of content, bar 2 extra characters that are based on asset reuse, and a singular unlockable stage, but that stage feels more like an excuse to tribute the NES rather than the game it's actually a pastiche of. All of this is to say, despite how rich in content later installments are, they can sometimes feel less unique by ways of bloating. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has enough characters and stages from the Mario series alone to surpass the entire contents of the N64 game, and at that point, well, it's not really much of a crossover, is it? This is just a Mario fighting game at a glance, yet it still feels so distinctly Smash Bros. So by that idea, if 2 or 3 or 4 fighters from the same series can fight on a stage from their series and it still feels like Smash Bros, then by all means, this could also argue to the courtroom to be something of a Smash Bros title too. Welcome to Temporary Relevancy, Kart Fighter, born from an absurdist mashup of assets themed around Super Mario Kart, while in actuality acting as a gameplay ripoff of the Street Fighter series. It's gorgeous. I'm so glad the 2 series could work out such a high-stakes crossover. To the dismay of the singular stray Nintendo employee watching this video and nobody else, Kart Fighter is a bootleg developed by the notorious 2-Taiwan indie studio Hummer Team. Hummer's place in history lies in countless unofficial games, with a speciality in ports for the Nintendo Famicom. Yes, like this one. This is going to sound bombastic to anybody with even surface level knowledge of the bootlegging scene, but I think the Hummer Team is shockingly competent despite their links to bootlegs and piracy. I'm not blaming you for automatically assuming they're based on that industry niche, just please understand their counterfeit efforts get so close to greatness. They never actually make it to greatness, but they get close, I promise. Their history begins with what I believe to be a completely original, albeit still unlicensed, RPG title. It's only available in simplified Chinese and nothing more, so it's a bit difficult for me, white and British, to understand, but Hummer really found their place in the world with a bootleg port of Street Fighter 2 for the Famicom. Conceptually, this is a solid interpretation of a 6-button fighting game for a system with only a loving duo of action buttons to work with. Light and heavy variations of attacks exist no more, that's to be expected. Again, there's 2 buttons, yet rather impressively, essentially every single command input from the original game made it through the conversion. So not only does the quintessential Street Fighter DNA make it through thanks to these command inputs still being intact, but I'd also argue the limitation of medium-only inputs actually makes the game more accessible for casual players, especially those coming in from Super Smash Bros. Hummer Street Fighter 2 was streamlined to be appropriate for the NES, not simplified out of laziness or to be easier to develop on their part, and I respect that. To a casual player, this port to lesser hardware doesn't reek of compromise to the fundamentals of the Street Fighter feel. The 8-bit counterparts to all the official artwork, sprites, backgrounds, gameplay mechanics, these were manual recreations by Eye and Feel. There were no shortcuts with ports of the source code or anything like that. Despite looking a bit janky, let's be fair, the characters are still sharply identifiable, and their movesets have the same impact as their market-eligible originals. This is an earnest result of passion and respect for Street Fighter 2, from a development team with high-level understanding of the Famicom's technicalities, wanting to represent the game on hardware that frankly isn't appropriate for this style of game. Considering they have no official development resources, Hummer Team's talents deserve recognition for the feat they've got here. at least from wusses like me, who only play platform fighters. To actual fighting game enthusiasts, the inability to strategize around a mix of light and heavy inputs immediately cracks this alleged authenticity you'll see commoners like me advocate for. And honestly, it's barbaric to even consider that when performing non-combative inputs such as walking and jumping can feel like trudging through halfway set cement. The inexperienced might not realize it, but once you've got some proper authority speaking out about this, the common folk begin to get skeptical of Hummer's development capabilities. With years to come, Hummer would continuously revise and re-release their interpretation of Street Fighter. The ports started looking nicer, the character and stage rosters expanded, and eventually the Street Fighter was bred out of this lineage entirely. Hummer found the confidence to use original characters in a game called The Legend, a game which still effectively ripped off Street Fighter, but it was given much more leeway to prove itself within its limitations without the tether to the Street Fighter name. I believe The Legend actually holds up quite well as an original title. The two-button combat concept is finally allowed to thrive when unbound to the franchise with the standard of 6, and all the extra years of ironing out issues like stuttered movements proved to Hummer could do good things. If anything, they were just inexperienced when they ported Street Fighter 2. By no fault of their own, their works never had the potential to see an official Nintendo license due to the complicated global status of Taiwan, and Hummer's history of bootlegging really doesn't do them any favours either. Yet Hummer, without access to any official development tools, kept trying. They seemed content where they were, and kept releasing new games, wishing to get better. Satisfied with 2 whole original titles to the Hummer name, Hummer team returned to bootlegging with Somari just a year later. Somari is a recreation of Sonic the Hedgehog for the NES, released 1 year after The Legend. I've got a volatile history with this one. I like its ambitions, but the physics just sometimes feel bloody atrocious. I'll put my full date on the end card if you're interested, but we're not quite finished with the fighting saga yet. A little after Somari released, Hummer returned to their fighting expertise with After Soju, Sensei Girls Fighting. It's another Street Fighter reskin, this time with characters purged from the Ramna anime series and Sailor Moon, with a couple of previously backported Street Fighter characters also being reused. And then some months later, Hummer's Street Fighter tribute show finally reached its encore performance with Kart Fighter, and this concluding act ended the show in 1995, allegedly. It's kinda hard to say for certain, because, you know, bootlegs, it's counterintuitive for them to be well documented. You're not really gonna hype up a release date for plagiarism on a golden platter to serve Nintendo's lawyers, are you? Kart Fighter is now an after-hours party staple for multi-karts, and arguably Hummer's definitive fighting title, thanks to, honestly, too long being spent refining the Street Fighter engine. Honestly, at this point, Capcom, just hire this man. This is what Kart Fighter's gonna look like in 2027. 3 years they've had to iterate on this engine, and considering the accolades I gave The Legend earlier, there were high expectations to deliver here, especially if Hummer wanted to justify returning to their rip-off roots. So, if you could please trust me in taking the chance to say, Kart Fighter is decently responsive, sturdy, and incredibly funny to look at. That's not to say it compares to any of the real top-charting official NES releases, but there's no freaky disjointed hitboxes. Quite literally, what you see is what you get, and the character roster is surprisingly balanced. The fact balance is even a consideration in a game like this kind of proves it understands the fundamentals of being a fighting game, even if those fundamentals aren't acted on the best. Yes, it looks weird, seeing a henched-up Donkey Kong Jr. give Luigi a pitiful kick up the groin screams off-brand, and your brain is probably screaming you're in dangerous territory of a shoddy rip-off title, but it's usually readable.
albeit compromised by a lack of fluidity between sprites. 2-frame walk cycles, no build-up or wind-down between idle states and attacks. Some characters get separate animations for walking backwards. This is usually done in fighting games to show, hey, look, if you get hit right now, you are going to sort of block and defend against the attack. Not every character has that. Some characters will just walk backwards and reuse their walking forward sprites. Movement in general is quite choppy, kind of like an LCD game. Characters seem to snap to predetermined spaces on a grid instead of having the free will of smooth movement. During gameplay, this isn't actually as restricting as it looks, but those looks give a jaded impression to spectators. And as kind as I'm trying to beat a kart fighter, I am just gonna outright say this: don't spend any money on the jukebox of this game. It's very hit and miss. Sometimes you'll get a not so bad but not great rendition of a song from Super Mario Kart. And at worst, the bit-crushed squeals of an asthmatic guinea pig make the cut. Kart Fighter is still built on the same engine as the first Street Fighter bootleg, so the core gameplay is the same, only 2 buttons, only medium attacks, no heavy and light. Command inputs are still there, and they're still ripped off from Street Fighter, despite the new characters in the branding. But the real thing that makes it feel Smash-ish is the 2-buttoned control scheme, inadvertently making Kart Fighter an accessible entry point for fans of the thought of fighters who are overwhelmed by the reality of every movement option being comprised of a family of 4 or more inputs. Now, considering I'm a part of that group, I get it, a lot of fighting fans will think I'm chatting absolute bollocks right now. And look, I've dabbled in most fighters for a few rounds, I can name a lot I've played, but I've definitely got less playtime across the entire fighting genre than I have in Hello Kitty Island Adventure alone, so there's proof my credentials on this topic get sick amusement from public humiliation. Every kind word I've said about Kart Fighter comes from a view of its development history, the struggles of Hummer, and what it could have been. Moreover, what Hummer wanted it to be. I think the intentions from a team like this deserve recognition just as much as critical evaluation of the end product. With that being said, I've explained my angle to you, so come on fighting game fans, come have your say too.
I've got something to say.
To me, Kart Fighter is the fighting game of all time on the NES.
Kart Fighter is a bit of a hard game for me to give an opinion on because while there are some aspects of the game that I would be inclined to call good, I feel like I can't call them that without tacking for what it is on the end. Because at the end of the day, I don't really think that this is a great game, but considering the fact that it's a fighting game on the NES and it's also a bootleg, yeah, I'll admit the game is about the best it could be under those circumstances.
I've been aware of Kart Fighter for a while. I'm sure anyone who's ever caught a whiff of a bootleg game knows about this oddity. I mean, usually bootlegs are just crustula imitations of another game, and this seems to be trying to pretend to be Mario Kart on the surface, but as it so happens, this is a full-on fighter. Well, as full-on as you can get with 2 buttons and a D-pad.
The fact that this game even exists is incredibly impressive. It's based on an arcade game turned Super Nintendo game with other Super Nintendo characters on an NES.
I don't know how many fighting games there are on the NES. It feels like kind of a system that can't handle playing these games.
I will say, for a fighting game of the time, it is very in-depth. There weren't a lot of games for the NES that had this much going on. And I don't imagine indie game development was as accessible as it is today.
I was actually quite impressed. It being a bootleg game from the 90s, being the engine of Street Fighter 2, I thoroughly enjoyed the game, despite being a bit crap at it.
Many of the types of issues you'd expect from a bootleg are present and accounted for. Sprites tend to flicker and just aren't pretty to look at in general. There are a couple of stolen assets, nothing about Luigi seems to work properly.
Also, Luigi is insane. I literally can't beat him.
And then proceeded to get my ass kicked by the Luigi.
Oh my god, Luigi's killing me.
There's an options menu, though the only thing that does change is the CPU difficulty. But even at level 1, Luigi broke my ankles, so either it does pretty much nothing, or I'm just incomparable to Luigi.
And you know, all credit where it's due, the CPUs in this actually fight back pretty decently. It's hard to spam one move without them figuring out a way around it.
He did that 5 times and killed me. He just kept doing that one move.
Okay, I'll be honest. I had a little bit of fun with the game for a few minutes, but man, this ain't great. And it's not even that it's made poorly, it's actually pretty decently put together. But it's a fighting game on an NES, it can only go so far. Another bootleg fighter, World Heroes 2, also tried the fighter angle, and good grief, that game plays and controls a whole lot worse. But it has Sonic, so it's clearly the superior bootleg.
You know, it's really easy to compare games today and how they look and feel and how it's so punchy and it just clicks perfectly. But for an NES game, it actually plays surprisingly well. Even first-party Nintendo titles like Punch-Out feel like you're waving through water just to get those punches. It doesn't feel the most responsive. For Punch-Out, it works because it's more of a puzzle game than anything. But almost every fighting game on the NES is just, it's hot garbage.
If I do have to give the game legitimate credit for one thing, I think it was a solid attempt to make a fighting game centered around Mario. While some of the moves are very clearly made up, they do at least go out of their way to give most of the characters one move that makes them feel like them. Mario and Luigi have fireballs, Yoshi uses his tongue, Koopa has a shell attack. Especially given the limited source material to pull from when this game was made, it's a much better effort than you might expect.
I can also appreciate that the stage design is gorgeous.
And some of the stages contain some pretty nice Mario references too. I like the Pokies on the desert stage and the Mario Bros. 3 inspired castle with the thwomps.
There's probably a child in Hong Kong that is still playing this right now as I speak. Actually, what time is it in Hong Kong? It's probably like they're asleep. Unless there is a child at 3 in the morning playing this game, which is incredibly sad.
I thought I could totally exploit this game and make it easy just by spamming in the corner, but you can't. All credit where it's due. It's a very impressive game. It's just not fun to play.
I mean, for a completely custom bootleg, the visuals are clear, readable, even at like 12 FPS you can still tell what you're doing, and the game definitely has a style to it. It's a little grungy almost. Now, is it good? Well, if you put these characters in Mugen, the chances are Marie over here is gonna get pieced up.
Despite its glaring issues, like the movement feeling stiff or wonky, I can commend them that this bootleg was built from scratch. And it's a fighting game on the NES.
It's a lot of jank and bugginess to put up with for a game that's otherwise just average, and I don't really think that it's worth it. Kart Fighter is an acceptable game, but not really much more than that, though I dare say that with more time and effort put into it, it probably could have been pretty good.
10 out of 10 times, I would pick Street Fighter 2 over Kart Fighter. However, it's pretty innovative to see Mario punching Luigi. You just didn't see that at the time. I understand the appeal because growing up, there were so many violent, evil Mario games that I played on web browsers at school. But, you know, you work with what you had, and this game impressively does that.
I thoroughly enjoyed the game. It was not something I would have expected to enjoy.
It's great for what it is. I'll just never play it again.
But when I think about how many other much better ways to get your fighting game fix there are, I can't help but wonder why I wasted my time playing this one. Oh, right, because Bloops told me to.
I've said my piece. Thank you, Bloops, for letting me get that out there, and you can take it from here.
What's up? Today, we're here to celebrate our dearly departed Hummer team, and if you don't mind, I'd like to read a few notes on behalf of myself to celebrate Kart Fighter and its contributions to the fighting game scene. Hummer had the potential to be a half-decent studio, maybe as contract developers to support a more experienced team, or maybe specialised as an art department, or even just outside consultants. Bear in mind, they did all of this without any official development kits. Their lack of experience can be attributed to their lack of recognition, not just as a software company, but also as a byproduct of Taiwan's status in the global community. In many ways, their bootleg ports are born from wishing to expand the reach of this art form we call video games to their home country when the official distributors wouldn't. That is commendable. Gripes with quality aside, it was their dream. That is why I decided to speak up in support of Hummer Team, despite the disgrace some of you may feel when hearing their name. TLDR, they could have been better, you just didn't let them. Any thoughts?